You never know where life's twists and turns will take you. It all started innocently enough with a family vacation in Rome. My wife, Maria, had been urging me to take a vacation for months, and I finally agreed. Her mother, Sophia, who had always been involved in our lives, invited me along. I didn't object. In fact, I liked Sophia. She was so confident, charming, and a bit mysterious. What I didn't realize was that this trip would change our entire relationship. We were living in Chicago, where Maria and I had settled after getting married 3 years earlier. Sophia, a widow for almost 10 years now, lived just a few blocks from us and was always dropping by for one thing or another. Even though we were all close, nothing could have prepared me for what happened on that summer trip to Rome. We arrived in Rome after a long flight from Chicago. I was exhausted, but Mary was bubbling with energy, eager to visit all the historical sites we had planned. The Coliseum, of course, was at the top of our list. Sophia, on the other hand, seemed unusually quiet. It was as if she was immersed in her thoughts, her gaze fixed on the airplane window as we descended into the ancient city. The first couple days passed without incident. We toured the Vatican, walked the streets of Rome, and enjoyed fine Italian cuisine. Sophia was always there for us, but we could feel the growing tension between her and Maria, though neither seemed to want to admit it. Several times, I noticed Sophia looking at me, her dark eyes lingering a little longer than they should. I didn't pay attention to it at first, but that tension began to make me uneasy. On the third day, we finally visited the Coliseum. I had always been fascinated by the history of the place, imagining gladiators fighting to the death, the roar of the ancient crowds, the grandeur of it all. The three of us entered the massive structure, our guide leading the way. While he talked about the history of the arena, I was immersed in thought, looking up at the towering walls that had withstood all the tests of time. Maria walked ahead of me, taking pictures, completely immersed in her own world. Sophia, however, stayed behind, walking beside me. Her presence was felt differently that day, more intensely. When I looked at her, she smiled softly, almost seductively. Something stirred inside me, but I quickly pushed that thought away, focusing on the words of the tour guide. About halfway through the tour, Maria said she wanted to take some more pictures of the upper levels, and I, sensing that she wanted to be alone, told her I would wait downstairs. Sophia stayed with me, and that's where things went downhill. "Why don't we get some rest?" Sophia suggested, gesturing to a secluded spot near one of the arches of the Coliseum. There were fewer people here, and the ancient stones provided some shade from the blazing sun. I hesitated for a moment, but agreed. We sat down on one of the stone ledges. The air was cool and filled with history. Sophia took a deep breath and shrugged her shoulders. "My back has been torturing me the whole trip," she said in a low voice. "I think I'm getting too old for this kind of walking." I didn't know what to say back, but Sophia leaned closer and her eyes met mine. "Do you mind?" she asked in almost a whisper. "Would you mind massaging my shoulders a little? Just a quick massage." I'd hate to disturb Maria with it. I was taken aback, but the request seemed innocent enough. I hesitated for a moment, thoughts darting around, but finally nodded. "Sure, no problem," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. I placed my hands on her shoulders and began to massage her gently. Her skin was warm under my fingers, her body relaxing under my touch. What started out as an innocent gesture quickly turned into something else. Sophia let out a quiet sigh, leaning back slightly as my hands traveled over her tense muscles. "You have strong arms," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I should have stopped right then and there, but something about this moment seemed unreal. We were sitting in one of the most iconic landmarks in the world, and all I could focus on was the way her body was responding to my touch. Her breathing became deeper, and I realized that without noticing it, I'd moved closer to her. My hands slid down her shoulders to her upper back, and Sophia shifted, giving me more access. I swallowed hard, feeling the heat rising between us. "Do you like it?" she asked, and there was more than just casual conversation in her voice. I faltered, not knowing what to answer. "Yeah, I think I'm pretty good at it." She chuckled softly. "You're very good at it, Antonio." I can't put into words how much I needed this. The way she said my name sent shivers down my spine. The whole situation seemed tense, and I could feel the line between mother-in-law and son-in-law blurring before my eyes. Her hand laid gently on my leg, and her fingers touched my thigh in a way that made me feel quite good. Before I could realize what was happening, Sophia turned to face me. Her eyes were dark, her lips slightly ajar. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. "Sophia," I began, my voice trembling, "we have to." She interrupted me by putting a finger to her lips. "Shut up, Antonio. We both know what this is." I opened my mouth to object, but the words wouldn't come. Some part of me had always found Sophia attractive, though I'd never admitted it to myself before. Now, the two of us were sitting together in the shadows of the Coliseum, and the energy between us was undeniable. "I saw the way you looked at me," she whispered. "And I felt it too." "There's something between us, Antonio." I didn't know what to say. My mind was screaming at me to stop this, to get up and leave. But my body was paralyzed by the tension of the moment. Sophia leaned closer, her breath warming my skin. "We can have something," she continued. "Something just for us. Maria can't know." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I loved my wife, loved her dearly. But Sophia's attraction, the taboo nature of what she was offering, was intoxicating. "Sophia," I fell silent, my voice weak. She placed her hand on my cheek and ran her thumb along my cheek. "You don't have to decide right now. But think about it, Antonio. Think about what we could have had." The rest of the tour passed like a blur. After a while, Maria joined us, completely unaware of what had happened. I tried my best to act normal, but Sophia's presence around me felt like electricity. Every time I looked in her direction, she gave me a knowing look, a secret smile only we could understand. That night, as we drove back to the hotel, the weight of what had happened rested on my shoulders. Maria sat next to me and chatted about the previous day, her excitement palpable. But I could barely concentrate on her words. My mind kept going back to the scene in the Coliseum, the feel of Sophia's body under my hands, the way her voice sounded when she whispered my name. I felt guilty, but at the same time, some part of me couldn't stop thinking about what she'd suggested. Would I have been able to go through with it? Would I have been able to betray my wife like that? Sophia sat quietly in the back seat, her eyes occasionally meeting mine in the rearview mirror. Each time, it made me both happy and sad. When we finally arrived back at the hotel, Maria had gone to take a shower, leaving Sophia and I alone in the living room of our suite. The silence between us was tense. She stood up, walked over to me, and put her hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to answer now, Antonio," she said softly. "But don't ignore what's between us. It's reality." With those words, she cast one last lingering glance at me, then retired to her room. I sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the door through which she had just disappeared. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: desire, guilt, confusion. What had I gotten myself into? As the night wore on, I thought more and more about what Sophia had said. Would I really be able to walk away from something like this? Or was I already too far gone? One thing was for sure: this trip to Rome had become more than just a family vacation. And as I sat there, alone with my thoughts, I realized that the decisions I would make in the coming days could change everything.